Welcome back to my channel, everyone. If you are new here, welcome, you have arrived at exactly the right moment, because the video you are about to watch is one of those videos that starts with what looks like a simple fan moment and ends with something that completely changes how you understand the global power of one single human being. And if you are already part of this community, you already know that this is exactly the kind of story we live for, the ones that go deeper than the surface, the ones that reveal what is actually happening underneath all the noise and the headlines. So get comfortable, because today we are going all the way in. The story we are breaking down today is about Jungkook. But it is not about a song, it is not about a music video, it is not about a chart record, even though all of those things are relevant to understanding why this moment matters. Today's story is about something that happened when one of the most respected cultural figures in the entire Middle East, the director of the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, Qatar, was having a serious conversation about Korean culture and the growing relationship between Qatar and South Korea. And in the middle of that conversation, completely unprompted, a name came out of her mouth that stopped the entire ARMY community in its tracks. She said Jungkook. She mentioned him by name. She talked about what she witnessed when he performed at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And she described the reception he received as something extraordinary, something she had genuinely never seen before. Now, if that sentence alone did not make you want to keep watching, let me give you the full picture. Because once you understand who this woman is, what institution she represents, what the context of that conversation was, and what Jungkook actually did in Qatar in 2022 that left such a lasting impression, you are going to understand why this moment is not just a cute fan update. This is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence that has ever existed for what Jungkook means to the world beyond music, beyond K-pop, beyond fandom. This is a museum director, a cultural institution leader, a person who has spent her professional life studying and preserving and promoting one of the world's great artistic and intellectual traditions. And she is talking about Jungkook the way people talk about experiences that genuinely moved them. That genuinely changed something. That stayed with them long after the moment was over. So let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about who she is and what the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha actually represents. Because if we are going to understand why her words carry weight, we need to understand the institution behind them first. The Museum of Islamic Art is not just any museum. It is one of the most architecturally iconic and culturally significant institutions in the entire Arab world. It was designed by IMP, the same legendary architect responsible for the glass pyramid at the Louvre in Paris, one of the most recognizable buildings on the entire planet. The museum opened its doors in 2008 and has since become a defining symbol of Qatar's broader vision to position itself as a global center for culture, education, and the arts. It holds one of the most comprehensive and carefully curated collections of Islamic art in existence, spanning 14 centuries, 3 continents, and an extraordinary range of artistic traditions from Spain to China, from the earliest days of Islamic civilization to the modern era. When someone who leads that institution talks about culture, about influence, about what moves people and what bridges worlds, people in the cultural and diplomatic community pay attention. This is not a celebrity gossip account posting about who they spotted at a concert. This is one of the most credible voices in the global cultural conversation making a statement about a K-pop idol. And that distinction matters enormously for what we are about to discuss. So what did she actually say? The director expressed her deep and genuine interest in Korean culture during a conversation connected to cultural exchange between Qatar and South Korea. And in expressing that interest, she pointed to a very specific moment as the catalyst. She pointed to the 2022 FIFA World Cup opening ceremony. She pointed to Jungkook. She said that she was deeply attracted to Korean culture, and that when Jungkook performed at the World Cup in Qatar, the reception was extraordinary, beyond anything she had anticipated or previously witnessed. That is the quote that sent ARMY into a collective spiral. That is the statement that has been circulating and discussed and analyzed in the fan community ever since. Because on the surface it is a touching moment, a respected figure in the cultural world acknowledging the impact of someone we love. But go one layer deeper and it becomes something much more significant than a touching moment. It becomes evidence. Evidence of something that BTS fans have been saying for years and that the mainstream world has been slow to fully accept. Let's go back to November 20th, 2022. Because even if you were not following K-pop at the time, even if you knew barely anything about BTS or Jungkook specifically, what happened that night was impossible to ignore for anyone who was paying attention to the world. The 2022 FIFA World Cup opening ceremony in Qatar is one of the most watched single live events on the entire planet. Billions of people from every country, every culture, every background tune in to witness that moment when the tournament officially begins. FIFA, the organization that controls the most globally impactful sporting event in human history, made a decision about who would headline that ceremony. They could have chosen anyone. They chose Jungkook, a 24-year-old from Busan, South Korea. A member of BTS. A K-pop artist. And in doing so they made a statement that went far beyond music. They told the entire world that Korean culture had arrived at the highest table of global significance and was not going anywhere. Jungkook took that stage at Al Bayt Stadium dressed in all black, surrounded by dancers, performing a brand new song called Dreamers that he had recorded specifically for this occasion alongside Qatari singer and producer Fahad Al-Kubaisi. The song was written to bridge two worlds, Korean and Qatari musical sensibilities woven into a single anthem of hope and aspiration designed for one of the most diverse audiences ever assembled in one moment. And it worked. Completely. Jungkook performed, was joined on stage by Al-Kubaisi, and delivered a performance that was described by media outlets around the world as one of the most memorable opening ceremony moments in World Cup history. He became the first Asian artist in the entire history of the FIFA World Cup to headline its opening ceremony. Not just the first K-pop artist. The first Asian artist. Full stop. That record is permanent. It cannot be taken back. It belongs to Jungkook forever. And the Museum of Islamic Art's director was in that world when it happened. She was in Qatar. She was part of the cultural ecosystem of a country that had just witnessed a young Korean man walk onto the biggest stage in sport and claim it with nothing but his voice and his presence. She saw the reception firsthand. She felt the atmosphere. She experienced what happened in that stadium and in that country when Jungkook performed. And it stayed with her. Years later, when she was talking about Korean culture in a professional context, when she was discussing the growing relationship between Qatar and South Korea and the cultural exchange between these two worlds, Jungkook was the example she reached for. Not a film. Not a fashion trend. Not a food or a language or a technology. Jungkook. A performer. A singer. A person who stood on a stage and made billions of people feel something at the same time. Now here is where I want to give you the deeper context that most people are missing when this story circulates online. Because the Museum of Islamic Art director mentioning Jungkook is not an isolated incident. It is one point in a much larger pattern that has been building for years and that has serious academic, diplomatic, and political dimensions that go well beyond what you would normally associate with K-pop fandom discourse. There is peer-reviewed academic research published in international journals that analyzes Jungkook's 2022 World Cup performance as a deliberate act of South Korean cultural diplomacy. Researchers from universities studied that performance through frameworks of cultural diplomacy, constructivism, and nation branding. Their conclusion was not that it was a cool performance by a popular idol. Their conclusion was that Jungkook's presence at the opening ceremony served multiple concrete diplomatic functions. It fostered mutual understanding between Qatar and South Korea. It strengthened the framework for international cooperation between the two nations. It established a positive image of Korea across the Middle East and broader Muslim world. And it advanced South Korea's nation branding on a global scale in a way that years of conventional diplomatic effort had not managed to achieve. That is what academics who study international relations concluded about what Jungkook did on that stage in November 2022. One song. One performance. One night. And the diplomatic and cultural reverberations are still being felt and documented years later. And then there is the Qatar tourism dimension, which is perhaps the most striking piece of this entire story when you look at it from a purely institutional perspective. The chairman of Qatar Tourism, the person responsible for the strategy of attracting international visitors to Qatar, for shaping the image of the country as a global destination, was also publicly referencing Jungkook in formal interviews around the same period. He revealed something remarkable. He said that Qatar had actively tried to bring Jungkook back to the country for further events and cultural activations. He said that Jungkook's mandatory military service, which he began in late 2023, was genuinely bad news for Qatar's tourism plans. Those are not fan accounts saying that. That is the head of Qatar Tourism saying that the absence of a specific K-pop idol disrupted their institutional strategy. He even spoke about how Korean culture had become so embedded in the daily lives of people in Qatar that his own young child was asking for Squid Game-themed food items. The Korean wave was not a trend they were watching from a distance. It was inside their homes, their schools, their conversations. And Jungkook, having headlined the World Cup opening ceremony, was the most visible and powerful human face of that wave. What all of this adds up to, the museum director's words, the academic research, the Qatar tourism chairman's statements, is a picture that ARMY has been trying to show the world for years. Jungkook is not just an idol. He is not just a member of a popular group. He is not just someone with good looks and impressive dance moves and a voice that makes people cry. He is a cultural force. A soft power instrument of such extraordinary effectiveness that governments and cultural institutions and academic researchers are analyzing his impact the same way they would analyze a diplomatic initiative or a major international policy development. He walked onto a stage in Qatar and moved a museum director so profoundly that she was still talking about it years later in a professional context. That is not normal. That does not happen with most performers, no matter how popular they are. That is the specific, unique, unrepeatable quality of Jungkook's presence on a stage, the way he does not just entertain an audience but actually connects with them at a level that transcends language and cultural background and prior knowledge of who he is. Think about what it means that she described the reception as extraordinary. She is not an ARMY. She is not someone who went to that opening ceremony as a fan of BTS. She went as a cultural figure, as someone embedded in the world of art and history and institutional prestige. She had no particular emotional investment in what Jungkook was about to do. She simply witnessed it. And what she witnessed was extraordinary enough that it redirected her interest toward Korean culture as a whole, inspired her to learn more, and gave her a reference point that she continues to use when talking about the cultural bridge between Qatar and Korea. Now let's bring this fully into the present moment of 2026. Because we cannot tell this story without acknowledging where Jungkook is right now and what this historical moment of recognition from Qatar's cultural world means in the context of BTS's full comeback. Arirang, the sixth Korean-language studio album from BTS, dropped on March 20, 2026, marking the group's first studio release in nearly 6 years. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with 641,000 album equivalent units in its first week, which is the largest opening week for a group since Billboard started calculating units in 2014. The lead single Swim became BTS's 7th number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, placing them ahead of the Bee Gees in the record books for the most number 1 singles by a group. The Arirang World Tour launched on April 9, 2026, with 82 shows across 34 cities in 23 countries, the largest world tour ever mounted by a South Korean act. And in the middle of all of this historic momentum, the MV for Hooligan dropped on April 8, adding another chapter to the visual storytelling of this comeback. Jungkook is back. Fully, completely, powerfully back. And the Museum of Islamic Art director's words from a few years ago now carry even more resonance, because everything she sensed in that opening ceremony performance, everything that made the reception so extraordinary, is on full display again in this 2026 comeback at a scale that is even more overwhelming than anything that came before. She saw something in 2022. She named it. She carried it with her. And the entire world is now watching the thing she saw continue to unfold into something historic. The Jungkook she witnessed at the World Cup was 24 years old, performing solo, carrying the weight of being the first Asian artist to headline that ceremony. The Jungkook performing in 2026 has everything he had then plus 6 more years of experience, growth, and the full BTS reunion behind him. If she was moved by what she saw in Qatar in 2022, there are no words for what this comeback would mean to someone with her level of cultural sensitivity and awareness. This is the story behind the screenshot. This is what it actually means when a museum director in Doha mentions Jungkook's name. It means that the impact of one performance in 2022 was real enough and lasting enough to influence how one of the Middle East's most respected cultural institutions thinks about Korean culture. It means that Jungkook's presence on a global stage does not just give fans something to celebrate and stream and screenshot. It actually changes minds. It actually shifts the way people with real institutional power and cultural influence think about what Korean culture is, what it means, and what it can do. It moves museum directors. It shapes tourism strategies. It inspires academic research. It becomes a reference point in diplomatic conversations between nations. ARMY always knew this. You have always known that the people you love are not just performers, that what they do on stage goes somewhere, does something, changes something that is impossible to fully measure. And moments like this one, when the evidence shows up from unexpected places, when a museum director in Qatar says the words out loud, those are the moments that confirm what you already knew. Jungkook is not just a singer. He is a bridge. He is a moment in history. And the world is slowly, steadily, unmistakably beginning to say so out loud. If this video made you see something you had not seen before, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me what part of this story hit you the hardest. Was it the academic research? The Qatar tourism angle? The fact that she is still talking about it years later? Tell me everything. I read every single comment. And I will see you in the next one. Purple Heart.